For more than 5 decades, nuclear arms control treaties were enforced between Russia and the US until this week. The last agreement has been allowed to lapse without a new one to replace it. So why has this happened, and what are the dangers? This is Inside Story. Hello, welcome to the programme. I'm Tom McRae. Well, since the US dropped 2 atomic bombs on Japan in 1945, the use of nuclear weapons has been an unthinkable prospect. Despite often hostile relations, the 2 largest nuclear superpowers, the US and Russia, have managed for more than 50 years to find agreement on controlling their most dangerous weapons. In a sense, such treaties have towered over their many differences while giving the rest of the world assurance. That was until this week, when their last nuclear arms control deal, New START treaty, expired. Whether due to a lack of urgency, deliberate policy, or a reflection on those now in charge of the world's largest nuclear superpowers are questions we'll explore in the programme. So what does this mean for the world, and can a new deal be found? Or are we at the dawn of a dark new era of danger with greater risk of nuclear war? We'll talk to our guest shortly, but first, this report from Paul Ging.
The threat of nuclear annihilation has hung over the world since the end of the Second World War more than 80 years ago. The Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962 brought the Soviet Union and the US close to the brink of confrontation before Moscow backed down on plans to install missiles in Cuba. A decade later came the first agreement between the 2 leading nuclear superpowers on weapons control. There's been at least 1 treaty in force since 1972. That was until this week.
Expiration of the New START treaty marks a grave moment in international peace and security. In the first time for more than half a century, we face a world without any binding limits on the strategic arsenals of both the Russian Federation and the United States, as the risk of a nuclear weapon being used is the highest it's been in decades.
Together, we are keeping our commitments under the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty.
So how has the world changed with the expiry of the treaty signed by Barack Obama and Dmitry Medvedev in Prague 16 years ago? The 2010 New START treaty had 3 main provisions: a limit of 1,550 deployed strategic warheads for each side, that is, warheads placed on missiles or bombers. It put a limit of 700 on the number of missiles and bombers capable of carrying nuclear warheads ready for deployment. It also put a limit of 800 on other missiles, bombers and launchers in reserve which could be brought into use. The treaty also included monitoring and verification measures to ensure each side was complying.
We don't do testing.
When pressed about the deal lapsing, US President Donald Trump said another one can be signed, but wants China to be included this time, rather than one between Russia and the US.
It's impossible to do something that doesn't include China because of their vast and rapidly growing stockpile.
Beijing says it won't consider entering into such an agreement, at least until it reaches parity with the enormous arsenals of the US and Russia. At the moment, Russia has 5,459 warheads. The US has only slightly less at 5,177. China's way behind with 600 nuclear warheads. The US and Russian delegations in Abu Dhabi to discuss the war in Ukraine reportedly also discussed extending the 2010 START agreement for 6 months, but that hasn't happened. Many believe a new deal on both those issues is of vital urgency for world peace. Just last month, the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists set the doomsday clock, its symbolic measure of how close we are to global catastrophe, at 85 seconds to midnight, the closest it's ever been. The clock's ticking on the world's political leadership to find a way of easing the dangers posed by nuclear weapons. Paul Ging, Al Jazeera, for Inside Story.
Okay, let's bring in our guest now. In Washington, D.C. is Thomas Countryman, former US Assistant Secretary of State for International Security and Non-Proliferation under the Obama administration. Joining us from Hove in the UK, Rebecca Johnson, co-founding first president of the international campaign to abolish nuclear weapons. And in Vienna, Nikolai, Sokov, Senior Fellow at the Vienna Centre for Disarmament and Non-Proliferation. Thank you so much for joining us here on Inside Story. Fantastic to have all three of you with us. Nikolai, if I can begin with you. I mean, you helped negotiate this treaty. You've spent decades working on this. I mean, I know recently you said that this feels like a personal loss now that it's come to an end. Can you just talk through how great the risk, how great the danger is now that it has ended with nothing to replace it?
Well, I actually did not negotiate New START. Yes, I negotiated some previous treaties. True, yes, INF START 1, START 2, and so forth. Yes, the danger does exist, but we should understand that an arms race will not begin tomorrow. Strategic balance is quite resilient. So we will not see tangible changes for some time, for some years, perhaps as long as 5 years. I do tend to treat that like as an opportunity. We do have time to negotiate a new treaty, but we should not actually postpone such negotiations, and we should try to start them as soon as possible. The main danger that I see is that is in the absence of any guardrails with every side, and I mean, well, at least the 5 nuclear states that are supposed to be official nuclear states, the United States, Russia, China, the United Kingdom, and France, will each proceed from the worst possible assumptions about the future actions of the other, yes, and they will start to build up, to modernize, and do other kind of things. And then the global nuclear balance will simply not exist. And we'll go back into the 50s, the era of unconstrained arms racing. So we do need to establish new guardrails as soon as possible.
Okay. But you do say that sorry, Nikolai. So you are saying that there is time at this point to try and do that. Rebecca, if I can come to you, I guess the crux of this is the world less safe today than it was a day or so ago when that treaty was still in place?
I think it's becoming more and more dangerous by the year and therefore by the day. But I grew up in the 60s and 80s at the height of the Cold War, when the intermediate range nuclear forces were being brought in on the Soviet side and the US side. And I can tell you, it felt like, nuclear war was on the brink. For various reasons, and we might get into them or not, we ended up through civil society protest, actually on both sides of the Iron Curtain, being able to persuade and bring Reagan and Gorbachev to the negotiating table. That was the first bilateral nuclear disarmament treaty that banned the whole class of the perhaps most destabilizing short, intermediate range nuclear forces, many of them land-based missiles, nuclear warheads on land-based missiles, supposed to be able to be fighting a nuclear war in Europe. And that treaty was groundbreaking. And it, like this New START now, has actually been destroyed by the joint activities of US President Trump in 2019, and Putin, who actually had already begun to be trying to develop a new generation of these short and intermediate range ground-based nuclear weapons. So we're in a different place in the world now, and we have to recognize our primary objective has got to be, how do we prevent any use of nuclear weapons in conflict. That's the real thing we need to do, and that's what I hope we're also going to be talking about today.
Indeed, we'll definitely get on to that. Thomas, if I can come to you now, I guess, can you just explain how we actually got to this point where there is no treaty between these two countries? I mean, the UN said the risk of a nuclear weapon being used is now the highest it has been in decades. I mean, everyone knows that both Putin and Trump know the stakes here, surely.
First, let me agree with what the UN Secretary General said, that this is the highest risk of nuclear conflict that we have seen since the 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis. And there are a number of reasons for that. At the moment, this treaty died because there was not a serious effort on the part of the United States or on the part of Russia to keep it alive. It could not be extended past this week, but the two sides could have agreed to continue to respect the central limits, that is, the numerical limits on deployment of warheads. And there is precedent for the U.S. and Moscow to do that, even in the absence of a ratified treaty. What Nikolai said is that you can hope that this can be the beginning of a new era of restraint and arms control. We don't have to go immediately to a nuclear arms race, but it's hard to be optimistic about that. First, because the nuclear hawks, those who believe in building more weapons, are in the ascendancy in Washington and Moscow and Beijing. Secondly, because the U.S. has not put forward any concrete idea for how to start negotiations or dialogues. It's made a number of public statements, but hasn't put any idea, not an idea for a treaty, just an idea for how to start a process on the table. And third, China will certainly resist the Trump administration's efforts to force them into a three-way dialogue with the U.S. and Russia. Keep in mind that China has many fewer weapons than Russia or the United States, but the only two countries in the world that are now building new nuclear warheads are China and North Korea. So there's more obstacles to this optimistic vision of a new era of restraint than there are incentives.
Okay. Nikolai, if I can come back to you, this new era of restraint and control that I guess all of you are talking about and are hoping for, but when you've got two leaders such as Putin and Donald Trump and those behind them, as we heard Thomas talking about there, I mean, you were saying before that there are no guardrails in place. So what is the greatest fear about going forward, and how do we make sure that that doesn't happen over the next 3 to 5 years?
Well, yes, in the absence of guardrails, basically you think that, for example, you sit in Moscow, you think that the United States, like in 5 years, will have something like 500 warheads more, so you start building up. The United States sees that, yes, and is really concerned and starts to build up too, and so on and so forth. That's number one. Number two, there are some relationships out there that make with an agreement more kind of challenging. For example, the Russians have always insisted, yes, the United States did so in the past as well, that if you try to limit offensive nuclear weapons, then you also need to limit missile defenses. So yes, and that's not actually the point of view of the current administration. Further, we now have long-range conventional weapons that allow you to win a conventional, actually, war. Also, yes, and that does increase, actually, the value of nuclear weapons. I would say that the challenges that negotiators in the future will face will be greater than what we faced when we, for example, negotiated the INF Treaty or the START 1 Treaty. And finally, the issue including other nuclear states. Yes, including China would be very, very desirable. But there is the Russian position that's actually shared by China that if you want to go multilateral, then you also need to include the United Kingdom and France. Yes, and we know that both of these are actually quite reluctant to join any arms control process, especially France. I frankly believe that getting actually the French into arms control negotiations might be in the end more difficult than involving China.
Right.
And we know that actually the United Kingdom and France will most likely also try to build up the nuclear capabilities, considering all the conversation about European nuclear deterrence.
Okay. Rebecca, obviously there's a lot of talk about another arms race potentially starting here, UK and France, as Nikolai was suggesting, and obviously China. I mean, you've spent decades pushing for the abolition of nuclear weapons. Are we further away from that goal than we have been in all your time?
I think that's the wrong question to ask. I think what we have to think about is where we are now, and then what are the opportunities. There are opportunities as well as crises. And the opportunities I see really stem from the fact that from 2010 onwards, and arising at a Non-Proliferation Treaty meeting in 2010, as part of the existing regime, that we still have to promote and preserve, came a humanitarian disarmament process that actually focused on what nuclear weapons actually do to people. And I've seen your screen showing the aftermath of the Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombings. And hearing about what nuclear weapons actually do mobilized a large number of UN member states, including some that were part of nuclear umbrellas, but in fact, including in some cases, certainly the civil society in countries that have nuclear weapons, to focus on preventing nuclear use. And the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, which was negotiated, let's not forget, in the UN General Assembly, open to all member states, but blockable by none, concluded the treaty and indeed adopted it in 2017. Over the next 5 years, enough states joined to meet the requirements for entry into force in 2021. And the meetings of states parties started work on the verification, on how to strengthen the treaty in the ways that are necessary to have verifiable and irreversible nuclear disarmament. Now, we all know that's a process, and one part of the process, and this is recognized in the new treaty as was not actually specifically recognized in the Non-Proliferation Treaty, which had an obligation, but that did have an obligation not only to reduce nuclear weapons, but also to pursue in good faith nuclear disarmament. But the new treaty contains all the essential prohibitions, not just on the use and the threat of use of nuclear weapons, but on nuclear testing, because the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty has not yet entered into force, on deployment, on transfer of nuclear materials that can turn into nuclear weapons. And that treaty has now, to date, 99 countries have signed or ratified that treaty. And this treaty also will be holding a review conference, an important review conference, as is the Non-Proliferation Treaty holding a review conference in 2026. So this is the backdrop in which we demand that the nuclear armed states, Russia, China, the US, Britain and France, but also that we engage with India, Pakistan, Israel, and North Korea very directly, not only in nuclear arms control and reductions and restraints, and certainly maintaining as much security as possible, but the actual prohibitions that would lead to us not being threatened with nuclear weapons being used or nuclear war.
Okay, Thomas, I want to come to you. Putin said at the end of last year that Russia was actually willing to extend this treaty while a new one could be potentially negotiated. I mean, you worked obviously under Obama. Then when Donald Trump took over in 2017, I understand he asked, or that his administration asked you to step down as you were on the way to an arms control conference. I just want to get your thoughts on how you think he views these nuclear treaties. Does he actually understand the importance of them, and is he interested in the technical details of them, or does he see it through a political lens?
Well, Donald Trump has spoken on a few occasions briefly about his belief that we should pursue denuclearization, that we should have smaller arsenals, a smaller nuclear budget. The U.S. nuclear weapons budget this year is more than $100 billion. I want to believe him. I want to believe that he is sincere when he says that we have to pursue fewer nuclear weapons. But there's a lot of things that cause me to be skeptical about his sincerity. First, there is the political pressure in the United States. Nuclear weapons and the defense industry in general are big business, and they are big supporters of the Trump administration. Secondly, the Heritage Foundation, which has designed Mr. Trump's authoritarian project, is pushing in a big way for an arms buildup on the nuclear side. Third, I haven't seen that the U.S. has done anything specific other than make statements to pursue arms control. In fact, the State Department has lost in the last year virtually everyone who had any experience negotiating with Russia in this field. So all the indications of his sincerity are negative. I hope that he understands how high the risk is and that he could at least direct people to get serious about beginning negotiations with Russia and beginning a dialogue, not negotiations, but a dialogue with China. That's the way forward, but I don't see either Beijing, Washington, or Moscow making serious steps in that direction today.
No. Nikolai, you were talking about China before, and obviously the Trump administration says any future deal has to include China. The US Undersecretary for Arms Control said China's entire nuclear arsenal has no limits, no transparency, no declarations, no controls. Is that true? And do you see any deal that actually involves China in the near future?
Well, yes, that's completely actually correct. China has never been part of any arms control measures. Yes, it does not make public any data about its current arsenal or its plans. Yes, and really the only way to get China to become more transparent is to get it participate in the process along with other nuclear states. But no one was really worried for a long time because China consistently stayed at very small numbers and with quite obsolete, actually, weapons. To some extent, I'm not actually surprised that it's building up. Really, China has now finally decided to think of itself as a superpower. As a superpower, it really wants not the minimal deterrence, but very kind of strong and robust deterrence. Yes, and that's what it's doing. Nonetheless, it would be really great to know how far China plans to build up. So for that, yes, I fully actually agree with Tom. At least a dialogue is really, really needed. Yes, I would emphasize, however, that still we got two more official nuclear states, the United Kingdom and France, that are going to build up too. Yes. Perhaps not as much as China, but if Europe wants its own deterrence, is independent of the United States, the buildup is almost unavoidable. we do need kind of to get some transparency on that
Yes.
as well.
Okay.
Some idea of the future size and composition of the arsenal.
Rebecca, it seems like everyone is on the same page in terms of dialogue needs to happen. It's not a reason to panic, but there is a reason to talk. What's the first conversation that you think that needs to happen right now?
Well, I think there has to be the recognition that the treaty that was negotiated by the General Assembly and actually has 99 signatories and growing all the time, is the treaty that the rest of the world has chosen. Nuclear weapons are a really stupid, bad way to even think about exercising deterrence, because the moment that deterrence fails, you're into nuclear war. And Donald Trump, a few years ago, actually recognized it. He said things like, nuclear weapons are stupid. You can't use them. You can only destroy the world. Now, we've rightly been told they're big business in the United States, and they are also big status for Putin still, and for countries like the UK and France.
Okay, Thomas, we've only got a minute or so left. If we can finish with you, what exactly are you going to be looking for in the weeks and months ahead to determine which way this could go?
I'm going to look to see if either Beijing or Washington make a serious, concrete proposal to begin a dialogue. Secondly, I'm going to look to see if the US and Russia actually have real experts sit down and prepare a discussion about the next agreement they're going to make. Finally, I will look at what the rest of the world does. I wish that all the non-nuclear weapon states, who are just as much at risk of destruction as the nuclear weapon states in case of nuclear war, I wish they would raise the profile of this issue. I don't think that any president or prime minister, when they sit down with Trump or Putin or Xi, talk about nuclear issues. There's too many other issues to talk about. And so those three leaders rightly conclude that they can do whatever they want without regard to the rest of the world. If there's not a political level interest from the non-nuclear weapon states, the nuclear weapon states will continue towards potentially a three-way arms race that will be more expensive and more dangerous than what we saw in the Cold War.
Okay. Thomas, Rebecca and Nikolai, thank you so much. We really do appreciate your insights, your expertise here on Inside Story today. Well, thank you too for watching. You can see the programme again anytime by visiting our website. That is aljazeera.com. For further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on X. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Tom McRae, and the entire team here in Doha, goodbye for now.